talking when you're in a stretch like this and things aren't going the way you want, do you look for frustration in your players and still doing what they need to do in the system? And if you see that, how do you address it?
Well, you look at just about everything, obviously. The objective is to get better and to continue to build. Obviously, we're building a lot of things here, from culture to football, things like that. So, but look at my focus personally when it goes like it is now, and it has been for a few weeks now, is just try to find ways to stimulate the growth as far as in what we're doing. We've simplified all the way back to the very first game of the season, so it's not as if we have too much volume, in my opinion. I don't think the players would say that either. It's really more of a case we haven't played together. We haven't played very well, at times in the games. A good example the other day in the game was there was for about 28 plays in that game, which was the first 28 plays of the game, I thought we were playing very good football. We were playing as good as we've played all year. What I mean by that is each week, the week before we beat the Giants, I thought we were getting better and all. Obviously, after that point, we let up that 80-yard touchdown pass and didn't come through on a couple turnovers that the offense had. So those were the disappointing things. And there's just a play here, play there that occurred, but they were very costly plays, and they happen for a reason. We've got to eliminate those plays and keep them to a minimum. Not only the number of them, but when you've got 60-yard run on the last play of the game and a 80-yard pass on against a simple 3-deep zone, things like that. When they happen to you, it's kind of you got to find out why they're happening to you, because those are defenses that everyone in the league has played. And matter of fact, many high schools play those same defenses. So it's not like they're too complicated. We've just got to keep from having those brain lapses, and that's the challenge right now, is just playing more consistent football. And we got a 60-minute game, and we got to realize that and recognize that and minimize the bad plays and not let them be so costly.
So to follow up on that, so is that what you do? You'll point to plays like that and say, look, this isn't about system. So don't, if you don't have the, comfort with the system yet, don't let this seep over into the system. This is something else here. Do you try to separate those that are just bust?
I'll say this. I would never say that necessarily, only because, look, everybody has to take blame for what's going on. And whether it is what you do or not, the objective, if it's a player, it's his objective to get better. As a coach, it's your objective to, if it is a problem, to correct it. And I think when you point that out to kind of take the blame off of something you're doing, I don't think you're sharing in the blame, and we all deserve some of the, to share some of it. I think more importantly what happens, and this does happen, is we watch the film all together as a defense, because in order to be accountable, everybody's got to see what everybody does. So we watch, we're in there for a couple, 2.5 hours watching the entire game together, so everyone can see, what's supposed to be done and who's supposed to do it, so that accountability factor is high. That's really how you correct the error. When everybody's in there and you can see, hey, look, this is who should have been there, what should have happened. If it came across to the guys as, wow, that's really tough, man, that would be hard to do, then obviously as a coach you got to say, you know what, I recognize that, and we're going to simplify it and make it better. But if it's not, and it's just a case of somebody not, being on their best behavior at a time in the game that's critical, then a different change has to happen. But to kind of make points of emphasis to the players that absolve the scheme, right or wrong, I think is the wrong thing to do, because again, then you're placing blame, and the objective should be to get better, not to just blame people. That's why I think when we're in there watching the film together, that's what really occurs, without making a point of, hey, see, it's not this, it's you. That's I would never do that. And I think that's bad coaching. That's bad teaching. That'd be bad parenting.
Also, with the new staff and getting to know these players, that I guess you wouldn't do it anyway, but just to let them know, hey, you just blew this coverage, you blew this play, you didn't set this edge. I'm
sorry, the question though, forgive me?
Is that the balance though? You get to know these players. Can you be yourself and light into them and let them know?
Oh, without question. Look, everybody. That's why I say when you meet together and everybody gets called out when something's wrong, because what I was pointing out was that we don't protect what we're doing scheme-wise. That was what I was saying a minute ago. I was saying everybody shares in what's going down. And I think when players hear that and they understand that, look, we're trying to do the best things for them, and they're, and there's accountability to the job that you have, just like every defense there is. I believe you get better response. You get guys trying to get better as opposed to pointing the fingers at one another or at the coaches or anything else. That's not you don't get any better by pointing fingers, whether you're a coach, a player, or anybody. The objective is for everyone to look at what they're doing, whether it's a coach, whether it's a player, and get better. And that's what the film shows. The film can show if something, why something broke down and how to make it better. That really is. But believe me, there's nobody's sacred in that room as far as getting called out. And believe me, if I feel something could be improved and is a better way to do it, then I'll say it in that room. I'll say, guys, this is the way we'll do this going forward. Whatever it be. And that occasionally happens, but that's part of the process of, when you're together a long time, that happens fewer and fewer to a point that it doesn't happen at all. But when you're new together, a lot of guys are asking questions, everything. Sometimes it's just a matter of language where they say, oh, we did that before. We really liked it. I didn't know we called it that. Well, it's, so again, there's a lot of, you gotta have a lot of things connect in order to get it right.
Will Anthony Brown get more reps at outside corner? Obviously, Trevon Diggs going forward.
Excuse me. AB will continue to play and continue to play more, yeah. I mean, he and Trayvon, and then I would say, obviously, Darryl works in, but the two of them get most of the work. Last week, there was times in the game where we actually had 7 defensive backs on the field, so the DBs that are available are getting the work. And as you well know, some of them, we've had some guys up and down for games from an injury standpoint, but they all get work.
Mike, 84 points that your unit has given up have come off turnovers. What do you tell your guys about responding to adversity, and how do you reconcile with the fact that you can't control what's happening on offense, but the defense still has work to do after?
It's a great question, because you'd like to think that your unit goes on the field with an attitude that defenses have, and that is to, whether it's on the plus 20 or the minus 20, the attitude is to stop your opponent. And I think our attitude is that, but no different than some of the lapses we've had in the field. We've had some in the red zone or when teams have taken the ball over. Unfortunately, some of the takeaways have been on a shorter field side. But again, as a defense, short field, long field, your attitude has to stop them. It's very difficult to put your finger on what it is. I think the same thing is happening after a turnover that is happening backed up, and that is just that we've had lapses at times where, and whether it's a lack of experience or whether it's whatever it might be, I don't believe it's I don't think it's a different problem. In other words, I don't think we have one problem when we have a full field after a kickoff versus a takeaway. I think we have the same issue, and that is, and like I said, that's the failure to play consistent football.
And on that note, maybe it's the same question of how you feel your team's playing at the beginning of that game to the end, but what's the key to keeping the guys' psyche right, so that if you fall into a hole, you're playing just as hard as on defense?
I would say, look, you got to go out and do it, and that is when you go on the field, if you want to keep that momentum going and keep that psyche, then you got to go out there and you got to stop your opponent. When you don't, for whatever that reason is, that's when that's when you kind of lose your stinger a little bit. Now you shouldn't, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that's what we've done so far. We've kind of shot ourselves in the foot a few times, and that's the disappointing part. It's, if it was something, if it was something uncontrollable or something that was just but none of these things are uncontrollable. We need to perform more consistently. It's that part I think is just, like I said, short field, long field. I think it's just it truly is. It's more a case of we got to play consistent. If somebody's thinking about a takeaway or turnover and that's putting them in a rut, hopefully we weed those people out, because that's just not how you go on the field as a defender. You go out there to stop your opponent and get off the field.
Mike, based on the comments that were made earlier this week, do you believe the players trust in what you guys are telling them and trust in the system?
I do. only because our meetings as a group, they ask good questions, they're all into it, they interact with one another. I think I think we get an awful lot accomplished in all of our meetings. We do have a good week of practice. I'd say it again, the lapses are the things that are surprising in the game at times. And we have those lapses in practice, at times. So it's not like not like we have a perfect practice. I'm not saying that, but we have good, energetic, positive practices. We have good meetings. I don't feel any pushback on the things we're doing. As Coach McCarthy has told you as well, we scaled way back before the season began just because of the way things were. But there's an awful lot of, the majority of our defenses never played together until this year. There's a few of them that have, but very few. If you look at the numbers throughout the season as it's began, and I think that's one of the things we got to get past. We got to count on a guy. We got to, if he's a teammate, he's on the field with you. You got to count on him just like you counted on the guys in the past. But that, as any relationship would be, that sometimes takes a little more time than you would like it to.
I know there's never a good time to allow a 69-yard touchdown run. It came, though, on the very final play for your defense. Do you view that as a lack of pride from that group to finish the game strong when the game's out of hand, or did you not view it in those terms when you addressed it with players?
That's a great question. And that play is, to be perfectly honest with you, has been on my mind to this, to about 30 minutes before I came in here even. I mean, I think about that a lot because it's like putting a knife in your back. It just we had, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that play or look at men's zone, but if you just do the math, there's 2 gaps in there and with 4 people to account for him, and somehow that guy came through there untouched. And I can't put my finger on why that was, to be honest with you. I mean, there's only, you can lead a horse to water, but it's just, and believe me, the players who are there, I think they're every bit as disappointed. But I wish I could explain that one. That one's a tough one to explain, to be honest with you. If it was wide open, it'd be different. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, so where did that leave you in terms of, you watched it on film, you rewatched it, you saw what happened. How did you, when it came time to approach it with players and work through it as a group, what was your message? Good
question. My message was, guys, let's look at the play. We looked at it, and I said, look, here's who's responsible for these 2 gaps. We've got an additional 2 players to clean up the mess, if that be the case. And we showed where the ball went and where our guys were. And trust me, it's hard for me to even say. I know this: 4 people had every right to be a factor, on the play, and I know they're as disappointed as anyone, as we are, because obviously that's an embarrassing moment to anyone. But there was no one player, because in that situation, we did everything, even to move the free safety up right behind them all to clean up anything that might have happened. But it's a tough one to explain, as far as, other than to say, hey, each one of you guys has a right to be in there. That part is for sure. But how it got through there without being touched. Christy?
Yes, Mike, I wanted to follow up. You referenced earlier the package where you have the 7 defensive backs. I know you went to that early in the first quarter and used it a lot. First of all, what do you call that package? I asked so that we can reference it on our broadcast, like nickel, dime, et cetera. What do you call that package when Parker and Thompson come in? And secondly, what are the benefits matchup-wise if and when you go to that particular package?
Well, not to disclose, most people call it the same thing. It's just we call it a penny package. Most of the time, your different personnel groupings are, whether they're nickel, dime, penny, quarter, dollar, those types of things. You kind of put it in a family of words, so there's no confusion as far as what the word means. When somebody hears money, usually the players are thinking about personnel groupings. And so that's a simplification. Again, I'm going to mention this about it. When you do put in a new system, language is so critical to teaching, because if the language is hard to learn, it's hard to really know. I mean, it kind of stops you from even playing fast football. You know, all we're playing is a game of math in the game of football. And you don't want to slow guys down just because they can't understand the verbiage. And I think our verbiage makes a lot of good sense to players. And some verbiage is the same throughout the league. And I would say personnel groupings is that way. As far as why do you get in different personnel groupings, the offense dictates to a large degree who you put on the field. And the skill players determine a lot of that as well. So typically when people go with more defensive backs, it's because people have more wide receivers on the field. Just like if they have less DBs on the field, it's typically because there's less wide receivers. In its simplest form, that's kind of what you do. You chase matchups, and everybody, you know, that's pretty much a common thing throughout the league.
You know, we'll finish up with Brad.
Thanks, Scott. Coach McCarthy said, Mike, from day one that he is a believer in fitting the scheme to the players. As you kind of look back at the first 7 weeks, 6 weeks, do you feel comfortable that you've done that?
I do. I feel completely comfortable. I really do. We're not doing anything. To be honest with you, I wish we were able to sit here and say, man, we are creative. We've got this and that, but we've reduced things down to the point we're just trying to teach good, sound, basic, fundamental football most of the time, and that's what we're playing. I mean, there's occasions in the game where we get a little deeper into defeating protections, which is a big thing on third down. It's very difficult if you don't try to defeat protections on third down that you actually get off the field, much like the 7 DB package kind of a thing, those types of things. So there's a time. If you look at a defense, I'll use an extreme, a team like Baltimore who does an awful lot, and they do a lot of scheme, a lot of different things throughout. And they do it in all situations, very successful with it, but they've been doing it for a long time. They've been doing it for 20 years. So anyone that comes into that system's kind of got it. When you just start out in your new system, some coaches are just simple all the time anyway. But as Mike McCarthy would tell you, and as my experience would tell me, there's times to be simple. When you're trying to build like we are, I think that's a good time. But as you progress and you get closer to the playoffs, if you don't want to go home early in the playoffs, you better have something in your bag because you're going to play Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. You're going to play somebody that's really good. And if you show up, you know, with a knife and it's a gunfight, you're going to lose. And those quarterbacks, that's exactly what you've got. So you're always preparing not only for each week and trying to win, but when you get to the end and you get into the playoffs, so to speak, you want to have enough, that you can put up a good fight and not just figure, hey, it sure was great to go to the playoffs, but we go home every time. So I know that's a long ways off, and it's not even our goal right now, but we're not even at that point either. So that's why we reduced a lot of things, and we're trying to just teach good, basic, fundamental things at this point. But if I had to go back to the beginning, we'd be right where, we started with a pretty basic thing too. It has the ability to go further, meaning scheme-wise, but it's not going to go anywhere till we play better ball.
Thank you.
Thank you all.